This session has a large agenda. If you look at the slide, today we are going to talk about project cost management process, human resources management process, project communication management process, project procurement management process, and project integration management process. In addition, we are going to talk about role of project manager in project management. Now, let us start with project cost management processes. The project cost management process is primarily concerned with the cost of resources needed to complete a project. Okay. We are worried about the life cycle costing together with the value engineering or whatever other techniques that we can use to reduce the cost. And of course, as you know that we always try to compromise between cost, time and quality. Improving the quality and performance and at the same time reducing a cost is a big challenge. Okay. So, taking this kind of decision, the optimal decisions involves 4 sub processes. If you look at the slide again, okay, the first is resources planning process, the cost estimation process, the cost budgeting process and the cost control process. Now, in our particular context, the resources planning process is aimed at determining what physical resources like people, material, equipment will be required and in what quantities they will be required, when and where they will be required to perform the project. Okay. Obviously, the resources planning needs to be very closely tied down with cost estimation. Important questions need to be answered during the planning as to what is the organization history in doing similar tasks, does the organization have the necessary resources or we need to procure them from outside? Would it take, would it make sense to, outsource the thing rather than hiring somebody or consulting somebody, something like that, So, with the organizational policies, the available resources, we need to strike a balance. Now, the resource estimation basically, affected by the nature of the project and the organization. Estimation should be done by people, ideally by the people who are experienced in doing it and have the expertise, people who are familiar with doing the job, and consumers of resources should be involved in making the estimates. Various alternatives related to resources should be thoroughly considered at this particular time. Okay. Once we have identified the resources, then we need to estimate the costs associated with these particular resources. So, resource planning follows by cost estimation. The cost estimating involves estimating the cost as the name suggests. Okay. This includes identifying and selecting several alternatives, spending more on design and like may result in reducing the production cost or some trade-offs of this particular type. Okay. So, when estimating the costs for contracted projects, it is essential to realize that the costing and pricing is not the same. Okay. Price is a business decision, whereas the cost is a actual something that you incurred. Okay. So, costing is linked with results, while the pricing is a business decision. Okay. Another thing you must realize, costing is only one input for making the pricing. When you are doing IT project estimation, cost estimation, the estimates are prepared, usually before the requirements are clearly defined. That is one of the major problems in software cost estimation. Adequate historical data may or may not be available, and the management and the stakeholders, may want lower estimates, for winning or getting the contracts. Okay. So, from that particular point of view, it is very difficult to strike a balance and come out with the cost estimates of this particular. Once you have made the estimates and you have decided zeroed in on the action, you need to make a budget. Now, there is a lot of difference between estimating and the budget. Budget is getting a approval for spending that money. Okay. So, the budget, the entire project expense may not come sanctioned at one go, and you may have to put forward budgets as the project progresses. So, the cost budgeting process involves allocating the overall cost estimate to the individual work items. So, in parts, you know, you will keep on getting that. Okay. Usually this will be associated with the work breakdown structure. So, the objective of cost budgeting process is to prepare a budgetary estimate and the baselines, you know, on the basis of which you will keep on comparing the actuals with the estimates. Okay. So, this way we will be in a position to do the project design. So, to give you an idea, you know, let us look at the slide for a budget. Okay. There's no need for us to go into great deal of details, but a budget will be of this particular type. It will say, for instance, you know, how many people are required, you know, what type of people are required, what kind of compensation is going to be involved in this thing, you know, hiring or keeping these particular people. Will there be anything that you will be spending outside to the on consultants or purchasing, you know, of this particular kind of thing. Okay. You might go further and say, yes, you know, some money may be required for travel. Okay. You might require money for depreciation, rents, lease. Okay. And, you know, other supplies, expenses, and maybe there may be some contingencies, and you will get a total with the adequate explanation being given on each of these particular items. Now, once you got the budget approved, you know, that becomes the spending. The authorization for spending has basically come, and now what you are required to do is on an ongoing basis to control the cost. So, the next particular process involved cost control process. Now, cost control is concerned with influencing the factors that cause the changes to the cost baseline, you know, to ensure that, you know, if there are any changes from the baseline, these changes are agreed upon. Okay. Determining the cost baseline has to remain static, not change, you know, and in case there are any changes, those changes need to be managed. Okay. So, the cost control basically includes monitoring and, you know, monitoring the deviations from the plan, you know, and then taking appropriate action, you know, in respect of those particular deviations. Ensuring that all changes are properly recorded, preventing incorrect, inappropriate or unauthorized changes. You know, these are some of the other things that go, you know, with the cost control kind of other thing. Okay. Another important thing is the stakeholders need to be kept informed about any changes that might have been authorized with respect to the baseline. So, in this manner, monitoring and cost performance involves understanding both the positive as well as the negative variances of the plan, both positive and negative variances of the particular plan. Now, once you are through with this costing particular part, you know, the next thing we are worried about is going to be the human resources. Now, again, if you look at the slide, you know, we have three sub processes here. Okay. The organization of HR planning, the next particular thing is staff acquisition and team development processes. Now, let us look at some of these particular things ourselves. Human resources management process are aimed at making sure that the human resources are used in a most effective manner. Okay. Basically, all the stakeholders are your resources, and make sure that you are utilizing, you know, the skills available and whatever else, you know, in this particular appropriate manner. Now, in case you have, you know, the organization as a whole, which is projectized, usually doing many particular projects, then human resources management, you know, there is a generic process within the organization, and your project human resource management needs to fit within this particular kind of activity. Okay. So, it involves understanding and applying the concepts of motivation, influencing people, power, you know, etc., for making sure that the project succeeds. Okay. Since the project, repeat again, you know, since the project operates within the organizational environment, you know, these concepts need to be applied, you know, on a wide variety of people. Now, IS work is affected by many things, you know, like take simple example, you know, demand for maintenance work is increasing, but people are not willing to work on maintenance jobs. Availability of packages is increasing, you know, but we still are not very sure how to integrate various packages, you know, with other particular activity that we are doing. End user development is on the rise, but, you know, we are worried about the quality associated with the end user development. Okay. There are other aspects like development activity is getting automated, you know, and less intervention is required, you know, at the downstream part of software engineering. Similarly, there is a wide variation in the project challenges, and from one project to another, there are a lot of differences that come. Last but not the least, we have a very serious problem with matching the jobs and the individuals. Okay, in most of the time, we end up, assigning, a low-end job to a highly qualified person. We have a problem, and similarly, in case we have an unqualified person working on another job, we have another particular problem. So, people factor is a very important factor in IS work. Okay, why? Because if you look at the IS professional, basically their organizational commitment is very low, whereas their professional commitment is very high. Development work, obviously, as I said, preferred to maintenance, and challenging work and learning opportunities are looked up to, whereas the routine work, is not really sought after. Okay, people want to work only on the latest technology. Okay, their growth needs are higher, but their social needs are relatively low. Okay, turnover is very high. It is of recent slowed down a little bit because of the general job market environment, but otherwise IT professional turnover is very high. Okay, and we have other problems, like people grow too fast, and social support, that you need to provide to a young manager is very different than the kind of thing that you need to provide this in. Similarly, what kind of organization structures that you follow also makes a lot of difference. There are different types of organization structure. At one end there are organizations which are functionally oriented, and have few projects, and there are at the other extreme projectized organization, which do most of their work as projects. Now, obviously, the project managers, different characteristics associated with the project will change, from one type to another, and in between, obviously, you have, middle of road kind of a thing. So, you may have a matrix type of organization where you are trying to sort of eat the cake and have it too, and achieve best of both the worlds of both the functional and the projectized structure. So, now if you were to look at the slide, you find that we have, so project manager's authority, for instance, is relatively low in a functional organization, but it is very high, when it comes to a projectized organization. Then the percentage of people assigned, entirely to the project is low, in case of functional, and very high, in case of the thing. Similarly, you look at all this project manager's role, could be a part-time, here it had to be a full-time role. Okay. Then you go next step further, and typical titles also will make a difference, So, in one particular case, you are designated as a project manager, other case you might be designated as a project coordinator, and last but not the least, the administrative staff may be present, a lot of administrative staff may be available in a projectized organization, whereas you might make do with the part-time kind of staff in other situations. Okay. So, organizational HR planning process involves identifying, documenting, and assessing various project roles. Okay. Roles, responsibilities, and reporting relationships, So, these can be assigned either to individuals or to groups, and the individuals or the groups may be part of either the performing organization or, part of the external or the extended organization. Much of an HR planning process, gets done, during the HR planning particular part gets done early in the project's life, like role, responsibility, assignments, staffing, organization chart, all these things are done early in the project's thing. Results of this process, however, need to be reviewed regularly, and like any other particular planning activity, periodically you need to review that whether this particular plan is working properly or not. Another thing, again, as I mentioned earlier, since we are working in a performing organization, the organization of the planning of the performing organization and the project planning, project HR planning must be very closely tied to each other. Now, let us look at what typically is the organization structure within a project. Okay. So, now you look at the slide, we have a project manager. Okay. And the project manager basically owes his existence to somebody, in the performing organization, some kind of a steering committee. Yeah? But he has one more boss. He also got to deal with the customer. Of course, it could be in the same organization or it could be from another organization. Then under the project manager, there are a lot of development teams. The project may be sort of split into smaller segments, and responsibility for development of different particular segments may be given to different people. In addition to that, usually a project has two other particular types of activity. One is quality team leader, the person within the project who is responsible for ensuring that the project work is done, so that the quality will be achieved. Please remember what we said. Ensuring quality is the responsibility of the performing organization. It is not the responsibility of the quality assurance department. So from that point of view, the quality assurance department of the organization will play a advisory role, whereas your particular project quality team leader will really ensure that your project is performing the way it is supposed to be. So again, look at the particular slide next, and we have one more particular role there, and that is the role of a configuration team manager. So mind you, these particular roles are very, very obvious in all particular project. These roles are obvious. Now, we ask the next particular question: who are the people who are responsible for software development? And we say that the responsibility for software development is with all the stakeholders in a different particular way. So if you were to look at the slide again, look at who are all the people who are responsible. First, we have the users. Users are absolutely, it is essential that they be involved in functional requirements, giving details like performance, volume, environment, constraints, acceptance criteria, and of course, the responsibility of accepting the product. The project manager, is responsible for planning, monitoring, control, adhering to time, cost, budgets, and managing the requirements, that changes to requirements that may happen. The developer is responsible for considering the alternative solutions and designing and developing the system according to the requirements. The quality assurance team is responsible for ensuring completeness, consistency, and traceability. And last but not the least, the configuration manager is responsible for ensuring that the product integrity is maintained. So if you look at the slide again, all these people have some very important role to play in any particular project. The responsibility for software development is not only with the software developers or the software development project manager. So every project will typically have a role responsibility matrix of the type that we have seen. Okay, so if we look at the slide again, we have on one side, the persons that we have with us, Jagdish, Nayan, Mohan, Neeta, Arun. And we have different phases of the project, like requirement, high level design, low level design, development, and the testing particular thing. And then we also have a situation like each of these people have different role to play, So the role may be only being a participant, in the group, or it may be accountability, or it may be review responsibility, or it may be the responsibility for giving inputs, or it may be the responsibility of signing of that particular kind of a project, So different people from that particular point of view have a different role and responsibility that is assigned particular thing. Now, once we got this particular job done, first particular question that comes to mind is, fine, we know exactly what we want, what type of people we want, and how do we acquire the stuff. So PM needs to get appropriate resources allocated to the project. This can be done either by assigning resources from within the organization or for acquiring them from outside. If you are a projectized organization, the chances are that the staff will be allocated to your particular project, and if you are like a one-off project, you may have to rely on hiring people from outside on a temporary basis, or subcontracting, outsourcing this kind of job. So strong influencing, strong influencing and negotiating skills are very essential for a project manager to make sure that the internal resources are allocated, the right quality and at the right time in the right quantity also. So acquiring and retaining IT professionals is a very complex activity, and good procedures, are required for hiring new people and or subcontracting them. Similarly, organizations need to offer different type of benefits, and flexibilities, etc., for retaining people. So like the HR function is, recruitment, retainment, and retirement. By that particular token, acquisition is a very important particular activity. In most cases, the organization may not allocate the best resources to every project, because it's not possible to do that. So somebody has to. So often you should never be worried about whether you got the best resources or the worst. What you should be worried about is the resource appropriate for the work that you're doing. Okay, and so long as the resources that you get are commensurate with the expectations that you have from these particular resources, you really are not worried where else they fit in the organizational structure. Okay, so allocation of resources is a very important particular activity. Now once you got this particular people, we need to do team development. Now remember, as we said, if you have a project, people have been assembled, quote unquote, from different sources to work on a project, and they're going to disband, as soon as the project is over. So there are advantages and disadvantages of doing this particular thing. From resource utilization point of view, this is the best strategy, but there are some other negative implications of doing it in this particular way. Now, once the project manager gets these resources, his next particular job is to make sure that he makes them function like a team. It's like an old time, we used to have a tape drive, in the tape drive, unlike a disc, never kept moving, and every time you wanted to record something, so it started moving and you had to wait till it achieved a full speed, and similarly when the recording was complete, it had to stop and it had to come from a full speed back to a zero. So there used to be the concept of this leading to what we call inter-record gap. By the same particular token, the project manager is interested in making sure that this inter-record gap kind of a situation is minimized. So what he needs to do, once he gets the project and the resources, he needs to make sure that the project as a whole start functioning as one cohesive unit as soon as possible. So the team development processes are very important. Okay. So team development is aimed at helping the people to work together effectively. Understand, there is a lot of difference between capable people and people working as a team. I'm always like my favorite example, in case people working in a team was automatic, we never should have a doubles match, in tennis, like the French Opens that are going on, or the Wimbledons that will be coming very soon. We should say that people who come first and second in the singles match together will be the best pair, and you always see that nothing of the sort. So Pius and Bhupati might be able to achieve a doubles title, but probably they may not even come up in the rankings in the singles matches. Okay, so the teamwork is very, very important. So team development involves both enhancing the ability of the stakeholders to contribute to the project and enhancing the ability of the project assignees to function as a team. So team building of a project becomes complicated when the assigned employees have multiple responsibilities. So you have people working for you part time, then it is more difficult for you to do this particular team development kind of a activity. Similarly, matrix reporting structure itself has its own disadvantage as it has its own advantages. So team development techniques include team building activities, training, rewards, recognition, providing challenging environment, co-location of people, and all kinds of things. We're not going to go into details of this. So team development process, ultimately what it results is in what is a one, improvement in performance of the team as a whole. Okay, and second, it also provides the input to the performance appraisal. At the end of the year, somewhere down the line, somebody has to do this particular appraisals kind of a job. So we have human resources. Next particular thing that we have is project communications management. Now this particular process is often very misunderstood. This meaning, the term communication here we talk about, it's got nothing to do with the communication in the loose sense that we normally use, ability to speak, read, write correctly and all that. That's not what we are talking about. When you have a project and many people involved working on a project and many stakeholders, then the communication between these people needs to be formally planned. So the project communication provides, the critical link between the people, ideas, information, data and all that. Okay, so project communication is not the same as the communication skills. Now project communications management is aimed at ensuring that timely and appropriate generation, collection, dissemination, storage and ultimate disposal of project data takes place. Okay, so you must realize that every member of the project team must be prepared to send and receive communication from other members, and also understand how this particular information that is being sent to and fro is going to be utilized by those particular people. Now, if you look at the slide now, we have different project communication processes that we have. So, first we have a communications planning process. Everything starts with planning, Then we need to have a information distribution process. We need to decide how this particular information is going to be distributed. Okay. One of the important aspect of distribution is performance reporting. Performance reporting plays a very important role in a project's life. And last but not the least, the administrative closure is very important. Okay. So, if you were to look at our particular this thing now, the communications planning process starts with understanding the information and the communication needs of all the stakeholders. Okay. The suitable means of providing, and then once you identified what are the needs, you need to provide suitable means for providing this information to them. Okay. So, whether you need to put it on a website, broadcast it, email it, verbally communicate it, informally, all this is a part of that particular job. So, the information needs and methods of communications, there are wide variety of wide variety of techniques available for doing this, and from that point of view, selecting an appropriate technique is very important. So, communications planning is usually done early in the particular project phase, and communication planning is tightly linked to the organizational planning. Okay. Similarly, like in many other particular processes, the performing organization may itself have certain kind of a project reporting structures, and from that point of view, you need to make sure that your communications process, is able to feed appropriate communication also to the performing organizations. Okay. So, what are the things that we get at the end of this particular job? One is we get a communications management plan. So, if you look at the slide again, it shows typically a communications management plan. So, we have stakeholders along one particular line, So, stakeholders, like we don't put the names here, but customer management, customer technical staff, the internal management, the internal technical staff, the training subcontractor, software subcontractor, whoever may be involved in that particular thing. Then we ask which kind of report the person must get, so the monthly status report or training plan or software implementation schedule or something like that. Then we have the next particular question, that what kind of format does he need to get it. So, it might need a hard copy, a email or an intranet, web display or something like that on one particular type. Once we got that, we just say on that, in case there are several people involved here, we need to identify the names of the contact person or a single person to whom this communication is going to be directed. So, in customer management person is Jolene, and the customer technical staff is Manohar and Ruchira and Satish and Sandhya and Vivek, and all kinds of people are involved, and this communication is directed to them. Once we have identified the communication, we need to plan for the distribution. Distribution of information is as important preparing the requirements. Okay. So, information distribution involves making information available to the stakeholder, So, there is one more, like there is more than one information distribution, then we need to say create and send a status report and hold periodic meetings, So, this kind of information distribution can also take place, So, it's not just restricted to sending a report, So, holding a periodic meeting also is a part of the communication. So, information distribution includes implementation of communications management plan and responding to unplanned requests for information that may arise from different stakeholders as per their authorization. Okay. So, responsibility for project communication management should be spread across the entire organization, and different people should be responsible for sending that particular kind of thing. So, typically the information distribution process outputs will be, one will be the project records and the project reports and the project presentations of different particular kind. So, information distribution methods, in terms of, the other methods like, the meetings, the other things, are supplemented by a wide variety of applications of the oral communication skills. Okay, remember the hard copies and all that are all fine, but they need to be. So, for instance, listening skills, interpersonal skills, meeting management skills, team building skills, proposal preparation skills, awareness training skills, complaint resolution, interviewing, negotiating, facilitating, conflict resolution, influencing scheme, you name it, and there are whole sort of applications of oral communication skills which sit on top of all the formal communication that takes place. Now, in the performance reporting phase, what we are involved in is keeping the stakeholder involved about how the project resources are being used to achieve the project objectives. Okay. It involves collecting, disseminating appropriate performance data, and reporting takes place from the status report, progress report, forecastings, and it is in this particular context. If you have to look at the slide now, let us see how this particular information flows. Okay. So, if you look at it, suppose we have a project actioning, which is based on all the information that comes, like actioning means something that requires your particular action. At the lowest level, we have the project level internal meetings, that may be happening, So, internal project meetings, will also provide project level information consolidation, and this particular data is given. At the next level, we may have customer level kind of a thing, the status reporting that you have, the customer reviews of the status report will also provide inputs for actioning. Then you have the steering committee, that really is a project manager's boss, and you are sending them steering status reports, and this particular steering meetings may also lead to a lot of inputs for taking action. And last but not the least, a lot of issues may crop up for reasons best known to Almighty. Okay, and from that particular point of view, we need to have several issue resolutions meetings. Issue resolution meetings are the only things which are not planned in the project plan. They take place as and when required. Okay, but basically what you are saying, like whenever you have this kind of a structure and communication, this communication leads to a lot of information being sent, within the project and within the stakeholders, and of course from within the project to outside the project, and receiving the data from outside the project inside the project. The administrative closure, in a theoretical sense occurred at the end of the project, but as we have seen earlier, it overlaps with some part of the project, and it continues well after technically the project is complete. The administrative closure process involves, if you look at the slide, collecting the project records, okay, ensuring that they reflect the final product that we have that we have delivered, hoping that it is according to specification. Then it involves analyzing the project's success and effectiveness, and making sure that the lessons learned are appropriately digested in the project processes, matrices and the checklists. And last but not least, archiving the information for future use. Okay, so updating the employee skills database, and reflecting new skills that have been learned by the people while doing this particular project. So this kind of activities come there. So the administrative closure process output basically gives you outputs like formal acceptance, project archives, project closures, and the lessons learned. Documentation filing is a very important activity, though it seems to be like taken for granted, So the need for good documentation, need not be overstressed. Software must be extensible, reusable, maintainable, and can't be done unless you have good documentation. And this documentation is collected properly and maintained properly and modified properly. You're not going to get the job done. So this documentation may be used either within the organization or outside the organization. Say for instance, the user manual being used by the users. Okay, so document filing issues, are like what are the inputs, the deliverables, the work products, the standards, and other documents like plans and exemptions and guidelines and recording of data, reviewing of the records, test records, all these particular things. How do you store them? How do you access control them? And who authorizes whom to use this particular data? So, project communication, like last part of the project communication, the project documentation is concerned, with everybody in the project. Now, we come to the next particular process, procurement. For a variety of reasons, an organization may not like to get all the job done by resources within the organization, but may prefer to procure resources, outsource resources from somewhere else. Okay? So, procurement means acquiring goods and services from an outside organization. Okay? So, an organization outsources products and services for a variety of reasons, like it may reduce fixed and recurring costs, a vendor takes the benefit of volumes and the scales, there are many illustrations that can be given, for instance, somebody who is contracting with Kodak, for photographs, you may contract for 1 million photographs and sell in turns, at a discounted price to various other people at a price below the retail price at which the Kodak sells the photograph, Similarly, you might get benefit by reducing the fixed and the recurring costs, because the vendor, that is the only job that the vendor does. Okay. Focus on core competencies, again you don't want to flitter away your energies into doing things which you are not really good at, in which particular case it will be better to have, such work outsourced if the frequency and the requirement is not very often. Okay. On a lighter side, it's like a hospital having to, subcontract the catering or the laundry or, some such particular kind of activity. By similar token, many software activities can be subcontracted. A good example of this would be like in case you are interested in developing some drivers for certain laboratory equipments of a pathology laboratory, and integrate this particular drivers into your. So, it may be too cumbersome for you to write drivers for equipment with which you are not familiar. It may be far easier for you to either get it done or to buy it ready made from the market. Okay. Then gain access to skills and technologies which you do not have. Another one, provide flexibility, leveling of resources, scheduling convenience, okay, and obviously increasing our accountability of the contractors, by putting them under legal binding, So, many reasons why people procure things. Okay. So, many purchases are done, in this particular manner. Procurement management processes include the following processes that we are talking about. Okay. So, you look at the first and foremost which we are talking about is, is procurement planning process. First decision that you need to take is to decide, what do you wish to procure from outside. Okay. So, the make buy decision, procurement management plan, statement of work, all these things need to go there. Then you need to do solicitation planning. What is solicitation planning? You need to request for proposals, the people competent to do that particular job, you like them to bid for your particular thing. Okay. So, solicitation planning, whom will you approach, how will you approach, how many people will you approach, and what type of decisions will you take, when, soliciting. Then the actual solicitation, if you look at the slide again now, then you have the actual solicitation. This involves physically, following up with the vendors and contacting them and providing them the information to make sure that, that they feel interested and quote for that particular job. Once various people have quoted for that, your next particular responsibility is the source selection, which one of these proposals that you have received should be the one to get the job. Once you have done that, the next particular thing is contract administration. You will have to make a contract, with the selected contractor and then make sure that the contract is being adhered to. And last but not the least, at appropriate point of time, you will need to close the contract. So, all these things are required to be done in a procurement kind of a situation. Now, we come to the most important knowledge area, and that is the integration, that is the project integration management. Okay. What does the project integration management involve? Project integration management involve, if you look at the slide again, okay, on one side the 8 knowledge areas that we have talked about and the evolution of the project as it happens, and during that particular time you need to make sure that these individual processes, knowledge area processes, are working well over the entire life of the particular project, so that the project succeeds, in a true particular sense. So, what are the main, so project management, project integration management ties together the activities from all other knowledge areas. It includes processes necessary to coordinate and the 8 knowledge areas that we have talked about, and this is something that is to be done throughout the project's life cycle. So, project integration management ensures that all elements, for instance, come together at the right time, and project work integrates with the organizational operations, and the project scope integrates with the product scope, and so on and so forth. Okay. So, successful integration requires commitment and the support of both the top management and the executive management of the organization. Okay. So, integration management process group consists of 3 sub processes. If you look at the slide again, first is we are requiring a project plan development process, then a project plan execution process, and overall change control process. Now, what is the project plan development process? Project plan development process basically involves making sure that the individual plans as are made and of course revised or integrated, from the 8 knowledge areas, make sense, when you tie them together. Okay. It involves a lot of compromising, in that particular. So, integrated management control plan, the total scope of the project is evolved. Okay. So, all work is defined and is planned and estimated and authorized, and schedules are all made and all that kind of thing. Okay. This process uses the outputs from the other planning areas, including strategic planning from outside the organization also. Okay. It inherently must iterate several times. It is not possible to get things right at one particular shot. So, like we mentioned earlier, though we studied the 8 knowledge areas separately, putting them together is really not a joke, and neither can these 8 knowledge areas prepare their plans, in isolation. There is a lot of interaction that goes on in that particular thing. So, typically what are the outputs that you get, from the project? So, if you look at the slide again, the outputs from the project plan development process are, basically all the things that you need for guiding the project execution, documenting the project planning assumptions in addition to project plan, of course, the documenting the basis for selection, the facilitating communication, defining contents and the timings of management reviews, and providing a baseline for project control. All these activities, basically these details of output, are used particularly. Now, once you got the project plan, all this other details right, the next particular thing that you are going to do is the project plan execution process. Now, the project plan execution process is the primary process for implementing a project. Okay. This process is directly affected by the project's application area, since this is when the actual product really is going to get created. Okay. During the project plan execution phase, the project team produces the project's product, okay, and the project manager leads the team and manages all the stakeholder relationships during this particular period. Now, managing and performing the work described, in the project plan is not an easy job. Okay. So, most of the continuous monitoring is required, and you must know in advance when you are going to monitor what. Most of the project's time and budget is spent on project execution, and continuous monitoring from that point of view, is very essential, making sure that the baselines are adhered to. So, periodic forecasts of final costs and schedules also need to be done, and in general you need to make sure that the project is on the right track. Any corrective actions that need to be taken may also have to be taken. So, management of software project execution, is specially designed for managing the particular job, and many software tools can also be used for doing this kind of a thing. Okay. So, typically if you were to use a product like say Microsoft's MS project, okay, it can greatly assist in creating and executing the project plan in hyperlinks to all kinds of things that you want, often used to the Gantt charts, and other schedules that you may be having, linked to deliverables and test plans, and team members can use this software for updating the project progress and resource utilization kind of a thing, and PM can use it for comparing the baselines with the actuals and generating various kind of reports. So, although these tools and techniques help a PM in project execution, the key lies in a positive leadership. That again and again we must bring out that the key is not the tools, but key is the leadership. Okay. In order to focus his attention on positive leadership, a project manager must delegate a lot of this detailed work, and using the tools to make sure that they are being properly used. Another important process that we have, in overall integration, is the overall change control. Again, we saw every knowledge area always started with planning and ended with change control. By the same token, now all the change controls themselves need to be integrated. So, the overall change control involves identifying, evaluating and managing the changes throughout the project's life cycle in all areas. Okay. So, objective of the overall project plan control process are, if you look at the slide again, first to influence the factors that create the changes. Our basic objective has to be to ensure that the changes are minimal, and if they do occur, they are beneficial. Second particular part is determining that the changes have occurred the way we think they have occurred, and last but not the least, managing the changes when they occur, because we do not like the changes to occur as and when okay. So, from that particular point of view, an integrated change control process involves first ensuring that the changes to the product scope are reflected in the definition of the scope, the coordinating changes across the knowledge areas, like proposed schedules and all that are affecting all the other areas that is done, and maintain the integrity of the performance baseline. Okay. So, all these things need to be managed by the particular thing. Now, while you are doing this, another particular issue is there, and that is organizational learning. You have already said you can't keep on making the same mistakes all over again, and the organization must learn from the past mistake. Okay. And from that point of view, organization learning is a process, if you look at the slide again, of identifying the correct and correcting the errors, and once the errors are corrected, we need to make sure that the experience that we gain while detecting and correcting the error is stored somewhere in the appropriate particular kind of a thing. Okay. So, that is one particular, storing the experience is very important. So, it may take the form of a procedure, forms, rules, systems, training, peer guidance, all kinds of things, Okay. So, another particular thing is the organization learning is facilitated through management practices, cultures, okay, organization cultures, environment that you are living in, then learning mechanisms like training, committee meeting, experience sharing, planning systems, procedures and all that. And last but not the least, the organizational learning, should not really be prevented or inhibited by the behavior of the individual. It is very essential to make sure, that the accumulation of experience is not in any way particular thing, because for many reasons like self-interest, perception of good ways of working, threatened feeling due to discoveries or something like that, the employees may or may not be interested in sharing all their particular. Now, let us come to the last particular part. What role does the project manager play in a project? Now, what you must realize that there are three kind of sets of people involved in that particular role. One is a project manager himself. Now, the project manager on one hand is required to interact with the top management, then with the line management, okay, and is responsible for coordinating and integrating the activities across the line functions. Okay. So, in that particular sense, a PM has more responsibility and less authority and needs to manage these interfaces with both the top management and the functional management. So, if you look at the slide, then you see that on one particular side, the project manager needs to interact with the top management in terms of strategic planning, functional planning and resource allocation kind of a thing. Project manager has to interact with these particular people. And on the other particular hand, the project manager needs to interact with the functional management. These are the people who really hold resources, and hopefully according to the directions of the top management, they cooperate with the project manager. So, functional planning, resource allocation, and then you have general management functions and the technical directions, and all these things, activities require continuous interaction on part of the manager. So, if you look at it from that point of view, a project manager is required to have a wide variety of skills, no, the project manager. So, PM is responsible for assuring that the project's goals are achieved, and the budget is achieved, the schedules are on, kept up to date, and from that point of view, he needs to also make sure that with, inadequate authority, he is still performing the job well, okay. So, from that, aspect, he must rely on excellent negotiation and what you call persuasion skills. If you look at the slide, when we see that there are wide variety of skills that a project manager requires, So, mind you, the technical skills we take of a project manager, we take for granted, but he also is required to have, skills like leadership, and resource management, communications and negotiations and marketing and budgeting. If he does all this particular thing in addition to, his professional particular job, then the chances are that he will do an excellent job as a project manager. So, the project manager is required to perform a lot of functions, like defining the scope, identifying stakeholders and work breakdown structures and estimations and, risk evaluations and contingency plans and, project reviews, participation and all that. And from that point of view, he needs to have, demonstrate a lot of leadership skills, some kind of visioning, technical competence, decisiveness, good motivator, good communicator, and so on and so forth. Now, we often end up, with engineers who are required to undertake a project management job. So, that itself poses certain problems. So, if you look at the slide now, okay. So, what do normally engineers do and what the managers do? The engineers are all aiming at minimizing the risk, emphasizing on accuracy, and they are worried about mathematical precision, whereas the manager is supposed to take calculated risk, rely heavily on intuition and make educated guesses in the face of incomplete information. Then the engineer typically applies sound scientific knowledge to data and situations and equations and that sort of a thing, whereas manager is really required to exercise leadership in decision making. It's not doing it yourself, getting it done, working with incomplete information, all this kind of a thing. Last but not the least, like solely, the people work with technical problems only, the engineers work with solely engineering problem, and from that point of view, you need to make sure that the manager needs to start working through others. Very important thing, to do it yourself and getting things done. Right? So, this is what basically we looked at. So, in case you are now transitioning, from that particular situation, okay, from engineer to a manager, you need to take certain kind of this. So, engineer must get propelled into management, for economic considerations and the desire to accept more responsibility and all that. And the new perspectives must be required, to be sort of brought into his training, teaching and bringing him up, things like leadership, detailed planning, risk taking, working through others, something that does not come in an engineering education. Managerial satisfaction also comes, through achieving the work through others and rather than doing it yourself, okay. So, conceptualizing a system is more to be done by the manager, and implementing and often can be delegated to other thing. Okay. So, exercising authority at the same time making other people do that particular job. Critical skills required for transformation are basically learning to trust others, learning to work through others, and learning to derive satisfaction from the work done by other people. So, that is the end of our project management sessions.